Hi, my name is Natalie Hoffman of flyingfreenow.com, and today we're going to be talking about how to get rescued from emotional and spiritual abuse. When I was living in the thick of emotional and spiritual abuse that came from my family of origin, my church, my husband, and other sources, including my own thoughts, there was nothing I wanted more than to be rescued. I wanted relief. I wanted to get out. I just wanted a normal life. And I believed that God would be my rescuer. I immersed myself in his word, and particularly in the Psalms, where he promised to be my strong tower to whom I could run and find safety. It was a beautiful, poetic thought, and I took it seriously. But God's idea of rescue did not include plucking me up and out of my circumstances. I really believed that one day he would, but he never did. Not in that way. He had something more transformative and empowering and long-lasting in mind for me. Christians have told me that when they finally realized that God wasn't going to rescue them by getting them out of their circumstances, that they walked away from God. He wasn't doing what they believed he was supposed to do. In their way of thinking, God is supposed to make everything great when we ask him to. We think that we should be happy, and we assume that God will make it that way if we just obey him good enough. But when it rains day after day after day, and we are being as obedient as we can, that must mean one of two things. Number one, either we aren't good enough, or number two, God's not doing his job. If we believe that we're not good enough, we will keep trying harder, or we might just give up. And if we believe that God's not doing his job, then we will either believe that in a God that doesn't care about us, or maybe that God doesn't exist or is irrelevant or has no power. I wrestled with this too. I really did. I have a lot of understanding for this way of thinking and compassion for anyone who's landed on letting go of that version of God. But I eventually came to a different conclusion that resonates with me. Now, before I tell you about my own experience with this, I want to talk about what it means to be rescued in the first place, because we may not all have the same ideas about what rescue looks like and how it shows up in our lives. So first, let's talk about what being rescued from emotional and spiritual abuse does not mean. It doesn't mean waiting for something miraculous to happen out of the blue. Now, can miraculous things happen out of the blue? I mean, yes, maybe, but most women who wait for this to happen will find themselves waiting until their deathbed. I have seen this firsthand. So just be aware of that if you decide to go that route, and take responsibility for your choice to wait it out and whatever that outcome may be for you. Secondly, being rescued from emotional and spiritual abuse also does not mean relying on someone else's knowledge and wisdom. Now, are other people smart? They can be, but just because they know stuff doesn't mean that they actually have the wisdom or understanding to advise you on your life. I mean, go ahead and learn from books and other people and therapists or whomever, but don't give up your own responsibility to make decisions for your own life based on all the things that you know about your own life. Nobody else is living your life. You are. You're the one who knows it best. Number three, being rescued from emotional and spiritual abuse also does not mean believing or trusting people just because they are in a position of leadership or have an authority role. I mean, for crying out loud, there are a lot of people who are leaders of some kind, and they are also dysfunctional liars. There are people who are leaders, and they also rape women and children in the name of God. Now, other leaders might do less obvious crap, but they are more subtly controlling and abusive. So my advice to you is to trust people, including leaders or teachers or counselors, who have earned your trust over a period of time. Don't just trust them because they preached a good sermon or they went to a seminary. My youth pastor that I had growing up, he would preach these amazing sermons that everyone in our church raved about, while at the same time molesting girls in our youth group on the side. So being rescued from emotional and spiritual abuse also does not mean giving up and doing nothing. Now, sometimes doing nothing is all you can do. There is a time and a place for waiting and doing nothing. But when the time comes to do something, you must do it. If you plant a garden, for example, in a dark basement, it's not going to grow. It doesn't matter how hard you wish for it to grow or pray for it to grow, or how fervently that you believe that it can grow. It is only going to grow if you dig it up, remove it from the basement, and replant it outside in the sun where it can get the food and the drink that it needs to survive. You must do that work. Now, the Holy Spirit of the living God lives inside of us for a reason. So let's go. Being rescued from emotional and spiritual abuse also does not mean accepting status quo. How many years do survivors endure under the advice of religious people to maintain the status quo in their dysfunctional relationship? It's tragic. To accept status quo is actually to say no thanks to personal growth and transformation. We do not grow by going along with the advice of others for our lives to keep doing the same things over and over again, things that have never worked and only make things worse. Nobody else, I promise you, nobody else cares as much about your life as you need to. Nobody. So they're not going to pull out all the plugs to help you fly free. The butterfly, when it's emerging from the chrysalis, needs to do that hard work on her own. Without it, that butterfly will die. And with it, with that struggle of emerging, she will end up being able to fly. God made her that way. He made us that way too. Being rescued from emotional and spiritual abuse also does not mean believing that you have no power and you need someone else with power to sweep you up and out of your pit. Our culture strives to strip people from power and give it to others. But every human being has their own power and autonomy to use for good or for evil. And so do you. Remember the story, the Wizard of Oz? Remember Dorothy? She wanted to go back to Kansas, but she didn't realize that the power to do so was on her feet the whole time. She was looking for power everywhere else, but within herself. Nobody could rescue Dorothy. She had to rescue herself, and so do you. So here's what being rescued does mean. It means planning for and making micro decisions that will eventually set you up to get out of your abusive relationship one day. Now, sometimes we think that getting out is just this one big, huge leap into the unknown. Like, I'm just going to file for divorce and get out, and I just can't do that. So therefore I can't get out. Now, maybe it can be like that for some people, but I think most of the time, women take a few years of getting their mind and their heart and their body wrapped around this idea, and also in the ideal place for getting out. It is a process. It is a long game. And I'm telling you, it is not the huge decisions that are going to decide the course of your future life. It is all the daily micro decisions that you make that will eventually do it. Secondly, getting rescued does mean learning new things that you've never learned before because you've decided to open up your mind and heart to learning those things. It means seeking answers specifically for yourself and your situation rather than applying these generalized blanket solutions to your life. Now, the people around you are all going to be trying to get you to do the normal thing, the thing that they are all doing and believing. Why? Because that makes them comfortable. That's the way they think it should be. But this is not the life that God chooses for his followers most of the time. He calls us into a life of walking in wisdom by his Holy Spirit. And sometimes that means bucking the religious system, just like Jesus did. You can watch the Chosen series. It's a video series about the life of Jesus. I think it beautifully illustrates this tension between organized religion and Jesus Christ. Or just read the Gospel of John. Read books that are outside of your denomination. How can you know what you believe if you have never studied anything other than what a few people in your childhood denomination taught you? There is a wealth of wisdom and knowledge and understanding to be had for the taking to those who are curious, non-judgmental seekers of truth. Do not be afraid. Jesus has you. Being rescued also means putting your hope and trust in God alone and the wisdom that He has given to you rather than in other human beings and all of their opinions and ideas. Being rescued also means fighting. And most of the fighting is going to take place right here in the space between your own two ears. This is the work that we do in my programs, Flying Free and Flying Higher. Being rescued also means believing that you can change the status quo of your relationship just by changing what you do in that relationship. It's not easy. There's going to be ridicule and kickback, but you can do it. I can show you how. It also means being rescued also means advocating for yourself, standing in the reality of your own experience and understanding when others try to tell you that you're crazy. It means loving the person that God created and loves, and that's you. Being rescued finally means learning how to control yourself and your own thoughts rather than trying to control all these other people or to control your environment or circumstances. Now, here's what I learned through my own experience. God is going to rescue you by using a very special person that He specifically put in your life. Do you know who that person is? It's you. And now I'm going to tell you about how God showed this to me for my own life. After a 3-year separation, 1 year in-house and 2 years of a physical separation, I realized finally that God was not going to miraculously get me out. He was not going to use my church to get me out. He was not going to use anybody else to get me out. God wanted to use a woman named Natalie to get me out. And when this first dawned on me, do you know what my response was? No, absolutely not. I literally had a shaking my fist at God moment right there. Here's what went through my head. No way. There is no way on God's green earth that I will be the one to get me out. That is totally not fair. I have fought and clawed and scratched to keep this marriage and family together for 20 years. And it is not fair that I have to now be the very one, actually by that time it had been 23 years, the very one who initiates the worst thing that a Christian can possibly do, divorce. Not fair, not fair, not fair. And I'm not going to do it. I cried, I whined, I freaked, I struggled. And then I went to a hotel one weekend and I brought 2 decades worth of journals that I had been writing in. And I read through every single one. And I made this document where I processed through some of the things that were jumping out at me from those journals. And during that weekend, I stopped feeling bad for my abusive husband, who was hopelessly stuck in his pathology. And I realized that I needed to start caring and feeling bad for a girl named Natalie. Who had ever tried to help her? Who had ever listened to her? Who had ever stuck up for her? Who had ever given a damn about that young woman who was trying so hard for so long to do all the right things? If you want to read a little bit about what I wrote about in my journals, I did a podcast episode on this a couple of years ago. You could go to the Flying Free podcast on your favorite podcast app and go to episode 53 and get a little bit of a glimpse into what I discovered that weekend. So I got down on my knees at the end of that weekend and I said, I surrendered. I said, okay, God, I've got her. I will take up this assignment from you to take care of Natalie. and I'm going to take this job seriously. I'm going to have her back. And 2 weeks later, I filed for divorce and I have never looked back. That was many years ago. I've never regretted my decision to take care of that woman. She is precious. She is messy, and she is beloved by her creator. And now she is beloved by me, and she is my responsibility, not anyone else's. So I rescued myself, but I did it because, well, I did it because of God. I realized that this is and always has been how God rescues anyone, through the hands and feet of his servants, his children, those who place themselves in his hands and follow the lead of Jesus Christ in setting captives free. This is not a loud revolution. This is a very quiet light that spreads in the nooks and crannies of this world's pain, and the light starts inside of your own heart. But before he can set anyone else free through us, he wants to set ourselves free. He wants us to set ourselves free. And he promises to be right beside us, loving us and cheering us on. You guys, he's not a genie in a bottle that we can just rub the bottle and tell him what we want, and he's just going to come out and give us everything we want. He is our living God, and his power is not in a bottle. It's actually inside of us to live like Jesus lived. That is a radical life of love and freedom from religion. That is the main thing that Jesus came to do, to set people free from religion, to set people free from all the man-made ideas of what it means to reach God. Do you remember Dorothy's red slippers? That's what I'm talking about. That's what he gives to us. So I chose not to walk away from God. I mean, I take that back. I did walk away from the abuser God, that with a small g, that so many Christians worship and emulate. But I didn't walk away from Jesus, because without his power and encouragement and love, I would have never been able to get out and heal. But I had to also do my part. Just like a butterfly has to get out of the chrysalis and do their part, I had to do my part. I had to let go of fear and shame, and I had to free fall into the loving arms of Jesus Christ. And you know what? He caught me, and he's going to catch you too. If you're interested in learning more about how to do this work of getting free, which starts right here in your mind and in your heart, consider joining the Flying Free program. You can learn all about it and read bunches of incredible reviews by going to joinflyingfree.com. We've had over 3,000 women go through this program in the last 5 years, and the results in their lives and the lives of their children, because so many of them come back to me and say, this work that I've done in my own life has trickled down into the lives of my kids, and we will never be the same again. As well as be able to influence other people, that they've been able to influence other people in their lives as they've done this personal work. And I'd love to see you to experience that same transformation for your own life. Until next time, fly free.